The emperor carefully selected several noble ladies for Crown Prince Pei Heng, but he insisted on choosing his crown princess through a lottery. My father accidentally discovered that the lottery tube had been tampered with and secretly switched it back, resulting in me being chosen to marry into the Eastern Palace. I thought my years of devotion would finally be rewarded, but instead, it turned into a heart-wrenching nightmare, on the day his concubine Wan Li passed away. A drunken Pei Heng stormed into my chamber, his bloodshot eyes filled with hatred. Su Wanyue, if you hadn't swapped the name tags back then, Lear should have been my rightful consort, she wouldn't have died in sorrow, it's all your fault. When his icy fingers closed around my neck, I finally understood, from the very moment my name was drawn, my tragic fate had been sealed. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day of the consort selection by lottery. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. I jerked awake, my back drenched in cold sweat, nearly losing my balance. The suffocating sensation from moments ago still lingers, making me unable to distinguish between dream and reality. Miss, what's wrong? The maid Yinxing asked with concern as she steadied me. I clenched my palm tightly, the pain making me even more alert. Looking up, I saw my father, the Minister of Rites, about to enter the grand hall for the final inspection before the ceremony. Father, I rushed forward and grabbed his sleeve. Where? He turned around, a trace of puzzlement showing between his brows. What has you so flustered? I leaned close to his ear and whispered a few words. Father's brow furrowed tightly. Are you certain? I stared into his eyes and nodded solemnly. My father gave me a deep look, asked no further questions, and finally agreed. Your Highness, in such circumstances, it would be best if Lear does not attend. A delicate voice came from behind. I turned around and saw Wan Li gently tugging at Pei Heng's sleeve with her fingers, her eyes red, looking utterly pitiful. Pei Heng immediately frowned. What's wrong? My status is lowly. If I were to be chosen, others would surely say Your Highness is showing favoritism. If I'm not chosen, her voice grew softer and softer, suddenly choking up. Lear fears she won't be able to bear the ridicule from others. As she spoke, her body swayed slightly as if about to fall, and Pei Heng immediately reached out to steady her by the waist. With me here, who dares to laugh at you? Pei Heng's voice was cold and stern, yet his gaze was indescribably tender. Wan Li leaned into Pei Heng's embrace, but her eyes glanced over his shoulder at me, flashing a triumphant look. How about? She suddenly straightened up, looking at me with feigned innocence, a mocking smile curling at the corners of her lips. Why doesn't Your Highness simply choose Sister Su as the crown princess? After all, everyone in the capital knows she has adored you for years, delivering soup to the Eastern Palace every day. The noble ladies around all covered their lips with light laughter, their gazes subtly drifting toward me. In my past life, I would have been humiliated and ashamed at this moment, but now, I merely smiled calmly and lowered my eyes in silence. Upon hearing this, Pei Heng also glanced at me indifferently. Let everything be left to fate. In truth, Wan Li was not a noble woman but the daughter of a hunter. During last autumn's hunt, Pei Heng fell from his horse in the mountains and was injured. She rescued him and cared for him for 3 full days. After returning to the palace, Pei Heng insisted on keeping her by his side and even considered making her his principal consort for a time. A hunter's daughter, worthy of being the crown princess. The emperor was so furious he smashed his teacup. Hanger, don't be foolish. Later, the emperor carefully selected several noble ladies for Pei Heng, but he proposed choosing his consort by drawing lots and insisted on adding Wan Li to the list of candidates. He knelt outside the imperial study for an entire night before finally persuading the emperor to relent. Since you insist, let her participate in the selection as well. If she is not chosen, it will be the will of heaven. As the grand ceremony began, the master of ceremonies announced loudly, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, please draw the lot for the principal consort. Pei Heng strode forward, reached out to draw a lot from the gold-lacquered tube, and handed it to the ceremonial official. The ceremonial official announced loudly, Lady Wan Li is appointed as the Crown Prince's principal consort. The entire hall erupted in an uproar, with murmurs and discussions spreading like wildfire. Wan Li covered her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. Your Highness, is this truly the will of heaven? Pei Heng's eyes were filled with adoration. It is the will of heaven, Sister Su. I truly didn't expect things to turn out this way. Wan Li turned to me, her gaze shifting between Pei Heng and myself. Your Highness, how could I possibly take the position of crown princess? Shouldn't it be given to Sister Su instead? the heavens have spoken, this is no child's play. Pei Heng cast a meaningful glance at me. Su Wanyue has her own destiny to fulfill. Upon hearing this, Ruan Li's eyes flashed with a hint of smugness as she feigned fragility, saying, Your Highness is right. Lear was too naive. She covered her lips with her sleeve and coughed lightly twice, appearing as if she might faint at any moment. Please, Your Highness, draw the concubine's lot. When the ceremonial officer presented the jade lot to my heart suddenly trembled. This had never happened in my previous life. Before I could gather my thoughts, Pei Heng had already swiftly walked up to Ruan Li. What's wrong? Have you been standing too long? Seeing Ruan Li nod, Pei Heng scooped her up in his arms. Li Dequan, you take over the drawing. With that, he strode toward the back of the hall without a backward glance. After Pei Heng left, the chief eunuch Li Dequan drew a lot and handed it to the protocol officer, who announced loudly. Lady Wan of the Chu family is appointed as the Crown Prince's secondary consort. The young lady of the Chu family standing beside me knelt in pleasant surprise to express her gratitude, while the other noble ladies all showed disappointment on their faces. After the ceremony concluded, the noble ladies left in small groups, some deliberately passing by me. Some people have been deluding themselves for so many years, yet in the end, they couldn't even secure the position of a concubine. Exactly, running to the Eastern Palace so eagerly every day, and now it's all for nothing. If you ask me, His Highness the Crown Prince must have long grown tired of her fawning ways. Shoo, keep your voice down, her father is the Minister of Rights. After all, I let these bitter words brush past my ears, yet the corners of my mouth lifted slightly. This calamity, at last, has been averted. In the carriage on the way back to the residence, father pondered for a long while before hesitantly speaking. Though I too did not wish for you to marry into the Eastern Palace, I know you have long admired the Crown Prince. Why did you ask me to remove your name slip from the drawing today? I lifted the carriage curtain, gazing at the gradually receding palace walls, and whispered softly, Nothing, father, it's just, I suddenly don't want to marry him anymore. I let the curtain fall and turned to my father with a faint smile. Didn't you and mother always say General Liu was a good match? This marriage, I accept it. Father was taken aback for a moment upon hearing this, then patted the back of my hand with relief. Good, good, I'll go and give the Liu family our reply now. Speaking of my infatuation with Pei Heng, it was probably the biggest joke among the noble ladies of the capital. That year, I was 7 years old and chosen to enter the palace as a companion to the princess. During my first audience with His Majesty, I stood trembling outside the hall, tears streaming down my face, my small frame shivering behind a vermilion pillar. Why the tears? Pei Heng, then a youth, stood against the light, his features as exquisite as a painting. Now that you've entered the palace, I'll take care of you from now on. With those words, he pulled a piece of crispy candy from his sleeve and pressed it into my palm. The candy was cloyingly sweet, yet it made me smile through my tears. From then on, I followed him like a little shadow, from the imperial study to the training grounds, through spring and winter. Once, the Empress caught sight of us and teased with a smile, Wanue is so fond of our hanger. I say, why not let her be your bride? Pei Heng turned his face away, his ears tinged red, but I took those words to heart and remembered them well. Later, when he casually mentioned how much he liked the crispy candy from Li's shop, I went to queue before dawn just to buy it for him. Upon learning that he was too busy with official duties and couldn't sleep due to headaches, I scoured medical books to learn how to brew a soothing herbal soup, delivering it to him every day. During those days when he fell off his horse during the autumn hunt, I was so worried that I barely slept for several nights, almost following the guards into the mountains to search for him. Miss Su is waiting outside the Eastern Palace again. A dignified daughter of a minister, degrading herself like this. The entire capital mocked me for being foolish, for being naive, but they didn't know that year, when Pei Heng was burning with fever, he had deliriously grasped my hand and called out Awe, nor did they know of the tenderness in his eyes on my coming-of-age day, when he pressed his personal jade pendant into my hand and said, Keep it safe. It was this very sense of being neither too close nor too distant that allowed me to indulge in a beautiful dream for a full decade, until Ruan Li appeared. He began taking her in and out of the palace, teaching her calligraphy and painting with his own hands. Even giving her the pine soot inkstick I had gifted him to use. He would grow so anxious when she clutched her chest with a slight frown that he'd personally summon the imperial physician from the Thai hospital and brew her medicine himself. He even knelt outside the imperial study all night, just to beg for a chance for her to participate in the selection of the crown princess. My heart had also felt sour and resentful. Clearly, I was the one who met him first. So why is it that now his eyes only see Wanli, until the day of the lottery selection for the consort in my previous life, when Pei Heng actually drew my name, I knelt before the temple, weeping tears of joy, believing the Bodhisattva had heard my prayers and granted my wish, yet I failed to notice the sudden chill in Pei Heng's expression on the high platform, as if he were drawing not the name of his beloved, but a death warrant, overflowing with happiness. I sewed my wedding gown. But on the night of the ceremony, he didn't even lift my veil, coldly uttering just one sentence, "As you wished, the title of Crown Princess is yours, as for the rest, don't even dream of it." With that, he turned and left. The red candle burned to its end, and I sat alone through the night. I didn't understand. If it was the will of heaven, why did Pei Heng treat me this way? The next day, a small sedan chair entered the Eastern Palace, and Wanli entered the residence as a concubine. At the concubine-taking ceremony, Wanli wore a water-red silk skirt, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the teacup. "Your humble servant offers tea to the crown princess." The teacup clattered to the ground, the scalding liquid splashing onto her silk stockings. She let out a startled cry and shrank into Pei Heng's embrace, revealing a reddened ankle. "Su Wanyue." Pei Heng's expression immediately darkened as he sharply rebuked. "Can't you even hold a teacup properly? Or are you deliberately making things difficult for Lear?" I stared blankly at the steaming porcelain shards on the floor. That teacup had clearly been overturned by her own hand. "Your Highness, please understand, this concubine didn't." Pei Heng cut me off, his anger flaring even hotter. Could it be that Rue intentionally scalded herself, unrepentant? "Go kneel outside and reflect." He scooped up Ruan Rue in his arms, his cautious demeanor as if cradling some fragile treasure. The Eastern Palace was immediately thrown into chaos, with eunuchs rushing to summon the imperial physician and maids scurrying back and forth with medicine boxes. I knelt on the bluestone bricks outside the hall, watching the physicians bustling about for that minor scalding injury. My knees had gone numb from kneeling, and by the time I returned to my chamber, I was burning with fever. Upon learning of this, Pei Heng merely sneered, putting on an act. A few days later, the Empress somehow found out that we had not consummated our marriage and summoned Pei Heng to reprimand him. That night, he kicked open my door and grabbed my chin, saying, "You dare complain to the Empress Dowager? Su Wanyue, you truly have some nerve. Very well, I shall grant your wish." Before I could defend myself, he pinned me down on the bed. His movements were rough, as if punishing me. When it was over, he gripped my chin and forced a bowl of contraceptive medicine down my throat. "Remember, you are unworthy of bearing this prince's child." The medicinal brew was bitterly pungent, spilling from the corners of my lips down to my neck. Gazing at the swaying tassels on the canopy above, I suddenly burst into laughter. So the Bodhisattva granted my wish, only to make me realize that a forced marriage might not lead to a happy ending. Later, I was left neglected in the most remote courtyard of the Eastern Palace. While Pei Heng had eyes only for Wanli was frail, so he ordered the finest tonics to be delivered to her courtyard. Wanli feared the cold, so he personally hunted white foxes to make her a fur coat. Later, Wanli fell ill. The imperial physician said it was due to pent-up sorrow, a lingering illness hard to cure. Pei Heng stayed by her bedside day and night, his eyes filled with a panic I had never seen before. He somehow found a folk remedy that required my blood as a medicinal catalyst to brew medicine for Wanli. When he made a cut on my wrist, his eyelashes didn't even flutter. For Wanli's sake, he drew blood from my wrist a total of 49 times. Yet in the end, she still died. She died when the first snow fell that year, died in his arms. That night, he kicked open the door to my chamber, reeking of alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. "Su Wanyue, if it weren't for you swapping the name tags back then, Lyre should have been my rightful consort. She wouldn't have died of sorrow. It's all your fault." He grabbed my throat, his grip so tight it nearly crushed my windpipe. I opened my mouth in agony, but not a single sound escaped. In the suffocating dizziness, I finally understood everything. The reason he insisted on drawing lots to select a consort was simply because Wanli came from a humble background, and he wanted to give her a legitimate chance to be chosen. He had already rigged the lottery tube, but never expected my father to discover it by chance and secretly switch it back. Since I was the one chosen, he assumed I had my father interfere, causing him to miss his chance with Wanli. So in this life, to avoid repeating the same mistake, I told my father not to worry about the lottery sticks and simply remove my name slip instead. If he went to such lengths for her, then I might as well grant him his wish this once. 7 days after the ceremony, my mother entered my room holding a sandalwood box and slowly unfolded the betrothal letter and gift list on the table. Her eyes smiled, as if she was extremely satisfied with this marriage. Lu Qin is a child of upright character and has admired you for many years. He is a good match. I lowered my eyes and smiled faintly. Daughter will follow mother's arrangements. Having lived a second life, I have grown indifferent to the entanglements of love. To marry someone who is considerate and caring is already a blessing from heaven. If that person happens to treat me with genuine sincerity, it is an extra fortune. Just as she was speaking, Inqing lifted the curtain and entered. Miss, the Jinqiu trading house has just received a batch of fashionable jewelry. Would you like to take a look? I nodded. All right. It's a good time to pick up the fabric I ordered the other day. As soon as I entered, my gaze fell upon a gilded and kingfisher feather hairpin. Miss Su has excellent taste. The shopkeeper carefully picked up the hairpin and handed it over. This design was rushed here post-haste from Jiangnan. You won't find another like it in the entire capital. I took the hairpin and held it up to the bronze mirror. Truly exquisite. Wrap it up for me. I was just about to pay when a cold voice suddenly came from behind me. Su Wanyue. It's been a full 7 days. Where is the calming soup you promised to prepare for me? The bronze mirror reflected Pei Heng's tall figure, his brows tightly furrowed, with faint dark circles under his eyes. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. I turned and bowed. Your servant has been busy preparing for the wedding recently, and truly couldn't spare the time. Pei Heng's gaze fell on the hairpin in my hand, and his expression suddenly softened considerably. Oh, preparing so early. I was about to respond when Ruan Li's delicate voice suddenly interjected. Ah, this hairpin is truly beautiful, Sister Su. She stared intently at the hairpin in my hand. This hairpin has really caught my eye. I wonder if sister would be willing to part with it. I gently stroked the tassels hanging from the end of the hairpin. Miss Ruan, when it comes to buying things, first come first served. This hairpin is already mine. Ruan Li's eyes instantly reddened as she bit her lip and looked at Pei Heng. Your Highness. Pei Heng frowned and said in a deep voice, it's just a hairpin. If Leah likes it, you should let her have it. Why be so petty? Seeing that I had no intention of yielding, he raised his hand and threw a pouch of gold leaves onto the counter. Today, this hairpin is mine by all means. The shopkeeper broke out in a cold sweat, wringing his hands in distress. I didn't want to put the shopkeeper in a difficult position, so I placed the hairpin back into the brocade box. Since Your Highness insists, then I shall yield it to you. The shopkeeper looked at me with gratitude. Miss Su, are you here to collect the fabric you ordered the other day? He took out a roll of bright red silk embroidered with golden phoenixes from the cabinet. It's all prepared, just as you requested. As soon as my fingertips touched the silk, Ruan Li leaned in again. This red silk is truly beautiful. If it were made into a wedding dress, why does Miss Ruan always have her eyes on other people's belongings? I interrupted coldly. This is the fabric for my wedding dress, custom-made and already paid for. Pei Heng, who had been standing by indifferently, suddenly looked up at these words. His gaze fell upon the bolt of bright red gold-woven satin, a flicker of surprise flashing in his eyes before turning into a hint of understanding. Su Wanyue. The corners of his lips curled slightly, carrying a trace of amusement. You're merely entering the Eastern Palace as a concubine. Such bright red is not for your use. He paused, then added as if bestowing a favor. However, if you like, I might permit you to wear it once at a private banquet in the Eastern Palace in the future. Upon hearing this, Ruan Li's fingertips dug sharply into the red silk, yet she dared not make a sound, only casting a pitiful glance at Pei Heng. Your Highness must have misunderstood, I said with a smile, tracing the golden phoenix embroidery on the silk. When did I ever agree to marry into the Eastern Palace as a concubine? Pei Heng froze, the smile on his face suddenly stiffening. What did you say? I met his gaze, enunciating each word clearly. This humble subject wishes to marry Lu Qin, son of General Ding Yuan, with a grand procession of 8 bearers, a proper matchmaker's arrangement, to become his principal wife. Pei Heng's pupils constricted sharply as he suddenly seized my wrist with such force it nearly crushed my bones. Impossible. I drew your name, and the Ministry of Rights has already recorded you in the Imperial Jade Register. How dare you, Your Highness? Mind your words. I struggled to free my hand from his grip. The concubine you drew by lot was clearly the young lady of the Chu family. Pei Heng's face instantly turned deathly pale. Staggering back half a step, no, this can't be. As if suddenly remembering something, he shouted sharply, someone summon Li Dequan to me at once." In no time, Li Dequan came scrambling over, barely steadying himself before Pei Heng grabbed him by the collar. On the day of selecting the concubines, who was chosen by the side consort's lot, "Speak, why your highness," Li Dequan trembled like a sieve. "It's Chu Wan, the legitimate daughter of the Chu family, the Minister of Revenue. Your highness personally approved the memorial, where is Su Wanyue?" Pei Heng's voice was hoarse. "Su," Li Dequan stole a glance at me, bewildered, but had no choice but to answer stiffly. "Miss Su was not selected." Pei Heng was as if struck by lightning, frozen in place. "How could this be? I clearly," Pei Heng murmured softly, his gaze towards me dark and unreadable. He staggered as he left, the hem of his brocade robe catching on the threshold, nearly causing him to trip and fall. "Your highness," Wan Li hurried forward to support him, but the moment her fingertips brushed Pei Heng's sleeve, she was abruptly shoved away. The force was so strong that she stumbled back several steps, her back slamming into the merchant house's door with a loud thud. Tears welled up in her eyes from the pain, yet she dared not approach again. Clutching her handkerchief, she stood frozen in place, watching helplessly as Pei Heng walked away without a backward glance. Those tear-filled almond eyes unexpectedly flashed with a trace of resentment. That night, the Eastern Palace was brightly lit. The palace attendants on night duty trembled as they reported that the Crown Prince had, for some unknown reason, flown into a great rage and smashed all the porcelain in the hall. At dawn the next day, Pei Heng suddenly barged into the Su residence. His eyes were bloodshot, clearly having stayed up all night. The servants in the mansion dared not stop him and could only watch as he barged straight into the inner courtyard, halting right in front of me. "Su Wanyue," he panted heavily, as if he had rushed here in a hurry. "This morning, I sought His Majesty's permission to take on an additional concubine." He slightly lifted his chin, as though this were some grand favor. "I intend to take you as my concubine, if it pleases you. I can make an exception and allow you to wear the color of a principal wife when entering the household." Your Highness jests. The true red color is reserved for the principal wife's attire, and a concubine must never overstep her bounds. I curtsied slightly. Pei Heng's eyes lit up. "So you're agreeing?" "Your Highness misunderstands. This humble subject was merely discussing ceremonial proprieties with you." I raised my eyes to meet his gaze, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Moreover, I am already betrothed to Lu Qin." "It's impossible." He grabbed my wrist abruptly, his voice rising sharply. "I don't believe it." I calmly retrieved the gilded letter of appointment from my sleeve and slowly unfolded it before his eyes. Pei Heng's pupils constricted suddenly, and his grip on my hand involuntarily loosened. He staggered back half a step, his face gradually turning deathly pale. "How could this be?" he murmured, then suddenly snatched the letter of appointment, turning it over and over as if searching for any trace of forgery. "Su Wanyue," he abruptly looked up, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes, but quickly regained his usual condescending demeanor. "Even if you're engaged, do you think Lu Qin can protect you? His father is just a mere military officer, while I am the crown prince of the current dynasty." Your Highness, please mind your words," I calmly interrupted him, looking straight into his eyes. "The Lu family has served as generals for 3 generations. His grandfather followed Emperor Taizu to expand the empire, and his father quelled the rebellion in the northern frontier, earning the title Dingyuan bestowed by His Majesty." "Are you questioning the Emperor's rewards with your words just now?" His face stiffened, clearly not expecting me to invoke the Emperor's authority. At the height of the standoff, my father hurried over. After performing a respectful bow, he said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, it is hardly appropriate for the Crown Prince to barge into a minister's residence unannounced." Pei Heng snapped out of his daze and snorted coldly. "The Minister of Rights wields quite the authority. Are you presuming to lecture this prince?" My father neither cowered nor overstepped as he cupped his hands in deference. "If your Highness has business, you may send a formal request for an audience. Barging in like this, if word were to spread, would not reflect well on your reputation." Pei Heng was left speechless, his expression flickering between dark and uncertain. In the end, he turned and left, throwing back a final remark before departing. "Su Wanyue, don't you dare regret this." Only after he had gone far did my father let out a long sigh, retrieving a bundle of bamboo slips from a box in his study and handing them to me. "Actually, when I went to inspect that day, I discovered that the divination tube for selecting the concubine was filled entirely with slips bearing your name. But your mother and I, seeing how hard it was for you to finally let go, didn't want you to waver again, so we never told you." I took the bamboo slips, my fingertips tracing the 3 characters Su Wanyue inscribed on them, when suddenly a chill ran down my spine. I recognized these handwriting all too well. They're unmistakably written by Pei Heng himself. No wonder he reacted that way yesterday, considering everything that's happened recently. I'm almost certain that Pei Heng has also been reborn. But why? Why does he want to keep me by his side in this life? Where, will you blame us? Father called out to me with concern. I came to my senses, clutching the bamboo slips as I turned and walked toward the tea stove by the window. Father, rest assured, your daughter won't act foolishly again. I lifted the stove lid and tossed all the bamboo slips into the fire. The charcoal flames burned fiercely, and in an instant, the bamboo slips curled and blackened. After lunch, Mother suddenly took my hand. Wanyue, accompany me to the general's residence today. Madame Lu has acquired some premium Biluakun tea and specially sent an invitation for us to savor it. I froze for a moment, then nodded gently. It so happens that your daughter also wishes to go out for a stroll to clear her mind. In truth, I understood perfectly well. Though they called it tea tasting, the real purpose was for me to see that young General Lu with my own eyes. Though they had arranged the marriage for me, they couldn't bear the thought of me entering a blind union. They wanted me to meet him in person before setting their hearts at ease. Once we entered the residence, Mother and Madame Lu tacitly withdrew to the inner hall together, leaving only Lu Qin to escort me to the rear garden to admire the flowers. I was still pondering how to handle this arranged meeting when I froze the moment I looked up. The young man before me wore an indigo blue robe, with a white jade pendant hanging at his waist. So handsome and upright he seemed to have stepped out of a painting. Upon seeing me, the tips of his ears instantly turned red, and he fumbled through his greeting, nearly tripping over his own sash. Miss Su, Ji, good day, he stammered, his eyes fixed on the ground, not daring to look at me. I couldn't help but purse my lips in a smile. Young General Lu, there's no need to be nervous. I don't bite. Only then did he look up, his clear eyes shining brilliantly, yet his cheeks still flushed red, as if I had bullied him. Lu Qin and I chatted in the garden for a long time, from poetry and literature to the landscapes of the frontier. At first, he stammered, but when the conversation turned to his expertise in military strategy, his eyes sparkled like stars. Watching his animated expression, I couldn't help but smile faintly. Only then did he belatedly flush to the tips of his ears, coughing lightly into a fist pressed against his lips before reverting to his usual reserved demeanor. From that day onward, this young General Lu began frequenting the Su residence every other day. One day he'd bring a box of freshly baked almond cookies, the next he'd present a few camellia branches still glistening with morning dew. And the day after that it would be some exquisitely crafted trinkets. Though we were already betrothed, in my presence he remained perpetually flustered, barely managing a few words before lowering his head to straighten his already immaculate lapels. One time, Ginkgo couldn't resist teasing, young General Lu never comes to our manor empty-handed. Hearing this, his hand holding the teacup trembled, splashing tea onto his robe. Instantly flustered, his ears turned red. I just... He stammered for a long while before finally placing the brocade box in his arms onto the table and turning to leave. I just remembered there's urgent business at the camp. I opened the brocade box to find a pear blossom hairpin exquisitely carved from white jade lying quietly inside. Beneath the hairpin was a floral note, on which was neatly written, "The pear blossoms in my courtyard have bloomed. More beautiful than in previous years." I smiled as I traced the elegant handwriting, suddenly realizing how refined and lovely these ordinary, uneventful days could be. Life went on as usual, and the small trinkets Lu Qin sent gradually filled my dressing table, the white jade hairpin carved with pear blossoms, the grasshopper woven from straw, the stationery painted with rabbits. Each one reminded me of his slightly reddened ears when he handed them to me. That day, I went to the trading company to pick up some newly ordered jewelry. On my way back, I took a shortcut and happened to pass by the side gate of the Eastern Palace's annex. Suddenly, Wan Li's furious voice came from behind the door. "Didn't you say this rebirth was foolproof? Why is Pei Heng now completely obsessed with Su Wanyue?" Hearing the word rebirth, I paused mid-step and moved closer. An eerie voice abruptly echoed in the air. "Warning. Favorability of target Pei Heng continues to drop. Currently only 45% remaining. If the mission fails again, the host will be permanently eliminated." Wan Li's voice trembled. Impossible. In the previous life, it was clearly, the last reload was due to the host's failure to achieve the Crown Prince's official consort ending, consuming all accumulated points. This is the final opportunity. My heart pounded violently as I quietly took a few steps back and tiptoed away. On the way back to the residence, my heart was still racing fiercely. Strategy, mission, favorability, elimination. These strange words kept swirling in my mind, though I couldn't fully grasp their meanings. One thing was crystal clear: Wanli never truly loved Pei Heng. To her, this relationship was merely a mission that had to be completed. How laughable. In my past life, my genuine heart was defeated by such an outright deception. As soon as I stepped into the mansion, Inxing came forward. "Miss, General Liu is here, waiting for you in the back garden." I steadied myself, composed my emotions, and only then headed toward the rear courtyard. Lu Chen met me, his face flushed as he pulled out a gilded marriage certificate from his chest. I wrote it 10 times, this is the neatest one. I took the marriage certificate and unfolded it, nearly bursting into laughter. This was no proper marriage certificate at all. It was clearly a little narrative poem, from the love at first sight 3 years ago when we caught a fleeting glimpse of each other, to the pear blossoms we admired together just the other day. Every detail was meticulously recorded across 3 full pages. Finally, he drew a plump, round rabbit and inscribed beside it, "A promise of growing old together, General Liu." I deliberately put on a stern face. No one writes a marriage certificate like this. The Ministry of Rights would never approve it if they saw. He hastily reached out to snatch it back. Then I'll go rewrite it right away, no need. I solemnly tucked the marriage certificate into my sleeve and looked up to meet his sparkling eyes. "This marriage certificate, I like it very much." My wedding with Lu Chen was set for the 6th day of the 6th month, coinciding with the very same day as the Eastern Palace's grand wedding. That day, I was in my room taking stock of the dowry when a sudden commotion arose outside the courtyard. "Su Wanyue." Pei Heng's voice came from outside the door, carrying a hint of suppressed anger. "Open the door." My fingers paused, and before I could rise, the door was abruptly pushed open. Pei Heng stood outside the door, reeking of alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. "Wei, are you really going to marry that man surnamed Liu?" I instinctively took 2 steps back. "Your Highness is drunk." Pei Heng's eyes lit up as he stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. "Wei, you're concerned about me, aren't you?" I struggled but couldn't break free, replying coldly, "Your Highness, please behave with dignity." "Dignity," he chuckled softly, emotions swirling in his eyes. "You never used to speak to me like this. Let her go." Lu Chen's voice came from outside the door, calm and composed. He stood beneath the corridor, his brows carrying a sharpness rarely seen in his usual demeanor. Pei Heng narrowed his eyes, not only not releasing me but instead pulling me into his embrace. "Lu Chen, what status do you hold to dare command this prince?" Lu Chen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "The marriage between this official and Wanyue has already been registered by the Ministry of Rights. With all 3 letters and 6 etiquettes completed, Wanyue is this official's betrothed, and protecting her is only natural." Pei Heng let out a cold laugh. "What does a mere marriage contract signify? If this prince were to request His Majesty to annul the engagement now, do you think this marriage would still hold?" Lu Chen's gaze darkened as he replied with neither humility nor arrogance, "If your Highness insists on this course, this general is willing to immediately request assignment to the frontier. I shall exchange military merits for His Majesty's approval." His words clearly implied that even if it meant marching to the battlefield and staining the yellow sands with blood, he would ensure this marriage alliance remained intact. "Are you threatening this palace?" "So what if I did?" The hostility in Pei Heng's eyes flared abruptly, while Lu Chen's knuckles whitened slightly from gripping his sword, instantly escalating the tension in the room. My gaze shifted between the 2 of them. "Your Highness, may I have a word with you alone?" Pei Heng was taken aback for a moment before finally releasing his grip. Lu Chen frowned as he looked at me, but I gently shook my head to reassure him. After a brief silence, he eventually stepped out, leaving only Pei Heng and me in the room. The moment the door closed, the anger in Pei Heng's eyes faded slightly, replaced by a complex emotion. "What do you want to say?" I looked at him and spoke slowly. "Your Highness, do you remember what you said when you choked me in the previous life?" Pei Heng stiffened all over, his gaze suddenly becoming much clearer. "You said, if you hadn't switched the name tags, Lear would have been my rightful consort. Now that you're about to marry Miss Ruan and your wish is fulfilled, what more could you possibly be dissatisfied with?" Pei Heng's face grew increasingly grim as he staggered backward. You too." "Yes." I met his gaze directly. "I've also been reborn. That's why, in this second life, I don't want to repeat the same mistakes." A storm of shock and remorse swirled in Pei Heng's eyes. eventually transforming into an almost agonizing struggle. I don't know why either. Every time I get close to Wanli, it's like some invisible force is controlling my thoughts. I simply can't control myself. That night I was drunk. I don't know what came over me. It was like something had taken control of me. I never intended to kill you. After your death, I regretted it for so long. I kept vigil before your spirit for 7 full days. That day I was drunk. And when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day of the ceremony. Do you know how happy I was? I specially begged my father to allow me to choose a concubine as well. And the lottery tube was filled with only your name. I don't know where it went wrong. He rambled on and on, his words coming faster and his voice growing softer, as if explaining, but more like confessing. Finally, he stepped forward and grasped my hand almost pleadingly. I've thought a lot these past days and understood many things. Only now do I realize that while I'm grateful to Wanli for saving my life, the one in my heart has always been you. Give me another chance, will you? I want to make it up to you. If you're willing, I'll go inform Father Emperor at once, depose Wanli, and make you the principal consort. When I ascend the throne, you'll be the empress, the most honored woman in all the land. Your Highness, I've already died once before. I withdrew my hand, gently touching the wrist he had slit to drain my blood in that previous life. Some things can never be made right, and no amount of making up can undo them. Pei Heng froze in place, the light in his eyes gradually dimming. In the end, he turned away in disarray, stumbling as he left. Outside the door, Lu Qin was still standing quietly under the corridor. Seeing me emerge, he rushed forward in a single stride, gripping my shoulders as he looked me over anxiously. Wanyue, are you hurt? I shook my head and suddenly noticed that his palm was completely covered in sweat. I'm fine, I said, patting the back of his hand gently to reassure him. It's all over now. On the wedding day, the long street was covered with red dowry for miles. I was dressed in a bright red wedding gown, with phoenixes embroidered in gold thread shimmering in the sunlight. Halfway through the bridal procession, a sudden commotion arose ahead. Pei Heng arrived on horseback, clad in a bright red wedding robe, his eyes bloodshot. As he reached the front, he dismounted and directly blocked the bridal sedan. Wei, come out and see me. Lu Qin immediately reined in his horse, drawing his sword to block him. Your Highness is getting married today. Shouldn't you be at the Eastern Palace to welcome the bride? What brings you here? Pei Heng didn't even glance at him, his gaze fixed intently on the sedan curtain. Wei, I know you can hear me. I lifted the bridal sedan's curtain, the phoenix crown's beaded tassels swaying gently. Your Highness, please return. I can't believe you could be so heartless. Pei Heng's Adam's apple bobbed, his voice choked with emotion. He took a step forward, only to be blocked by Lu Chen's sword sheath. Your Highness, I believe I made myself quite clear that day. Please leave. With that, I moved to lower the carriage curtain. Wait, look at this first. Pei Heng hastily pulled out a booklet from his robe, his hands trembling. Last time I told you how I couldn't control myself whenever I got close to Wanli. I've finally discovered why. Yesterday I found these in her box. She's not human at all. She's a monster. I took the booklet and saw the words strategy records boldly written on the cover. When I opened it, the pages were densely filled with notes. On February 7th, deliberately fell into the water. Pei Heng's favorability plus 5%. On March 16th, pretended to be bullied by Su Wanyue. Pei Heng's favorability plus 7%. On April 8th, deliberately drank the medicated tea, triggering heart palpitations. Pei Heng took care of her all night. Affection points plus 12%. Strategy, affection points. Suddenly, I remembered the words Wanli had spoken to the air that day. She went to great lengths to get close to me, to control me, just to become my official consort and complete her so-called mission. Pei Heng's voice was hoarse. Those things that hurt you, they were never my intention. Come with me. I can give up my position as crown prince. I can abandon everything. I only want you. I closed my eyes for a moment, then threw the booklet back into his arms. Your Highness, this changes nothing. Your Highness, a heart-wrenching cry rang in my ears as Wanli stumbled over in desperation. Her hair was disheveled, her face covered in blood, no longer the delicate appearance she once had, but rather like someone who had just escaped from prison. Your Highness, you said your heart belonged only to me, that you would take care of me for a lifetime. Pei Heng's eyes were filled with disgust and fear as he violently pushed her away. Get away from me. You monster. Wanli staggered back, suddenly bursting into mad laughter. It's all your fault, Su Wanyue. She suddenly pulled a dagger from her sleeve. If it weren't for you, how could I have failed time and time again? since I can't live, I'll drag you down with me. A cold glint flashed as the dagger in her hand thrust straight toward me. You. In the blink of an eye, Pei Heng abruptly pushed Lu Chen aside and shielded me. The dagger plunged deep into his chest, instantly staining his wedding attire an even deeper, more vivid red. Pei Heng staggered and fell to his knees, yet still clutched Ruan Li's wrist tightly, preventing her from taking another step closer. He looked up at me, blood frothing at the corners of his lips. Wei, in this life, I finally protected you. Ruan Li stared at her blood-stained hands and suddenly let out a piercing scream. No, system, give me another chance, please don't. Her body began to twist and turn transparent. Lu Chen swiftly shielded me behind him. Drawing his long sword, demon, Ruan Li's voice abruptly ceased as her entire form dissipated like smoke in the wind, leaving only the blood-stained dagger to clatter onto the ground. Screams erupted all around. Amidst the clamor, Pei Heng's hands slowly fell, the light in his eyes fading bit by bit. Lu Chen stepped forward, covering my eyes with his warm palm. Don't look, yet I still saw it. Pei Heng's final words, shaped by his lips, were I'm sorry. 10 days later, Lu Chen and I held our grand wedding ceremony once again. In the wedding hall, he gently lifted my bridal veil, his voice trembling slightly. Where, I finally married you. I raised my head, meeting his teary eyes, and lightly brushed my fingertips over his slightly reddened eyelids. Silly. Later, we lived in love till our hair turned white, surrounded by children and grandchildren. The Eastern Palace has a new master, and the past is no longer spoken of.